What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you my full review of the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. Now, as always, if you end up wanting to learn more about this phone, be sure to check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, as the name implies, is the successor to last year's Samsung Galaxy A23 4G, and just like its predecessor, the A24 4G has a really nice display. With this phone, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz Super AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 396, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. So yeah, definitely a great display here in pretty much every way. At 6.5 inches with a 19.5:9 aspect ratio, it is decently large, so while pretty much every phone at this point in 2023 is going to be around a similar size, the fact is most phones nowadays are pretty large anyway. And if you're doing stuff like web browsing, social media, or really just using your phone a decent amount, doing whatever, you are going to get a good experience here. Things are going to show up large and be easy to see, so definitely good when it comes to size. And with the 19.5:9 aspect ratio, we're also getting a taller, more narrow form factor here. So if you're doing something like reading or scrolling through social media, for example, with a form factor like this, you can fit plenty of content on the screen without having to scroll too much. And if you're doing something in landscape mode like watching videos or looking at photos, you're going to get a nice immersive experience, and things are going to look a bit more cinematic. In addition to the size and dimensions, the image quality is really good too. With the 1080p resolution, of course, we're getting a nice, sharp, crisp image. So when you're doing stuff where image quality is a bit more important, like watching videos or looking at photos, you will get a great experience here. With the 90Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a bit faster and smoother, making the phone feel a bit more premium to use. And with the Super AMOLED, compared to your average LCD type display, the colors are going to be a bit more rich and vibrant. The display in general is a bit brighter, and the viewing angles are really good too. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, the display is going to be a lot easier to see than, say, an IPS LCD, for example. So if you are someone who spends a lot of time outdoors, this is definitely something to think about. So in general, in, again, pretty much every way, the A24 4G does have a really nice display. So if you are looking for a more affordable 4G phone that still has a great display for consuming content, you're definitely not going to go wrong with this phone. Now for storage, with the A24 4G, we're getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so plenty of storage here. Now, of course, if you're really a power user and you have all kinds of apps and games and stuff like that, then you might want to get even more storage than this. But I feel like for the average user looking for a more affordable 4G phone, that's really probably not going to be the case. So for most people, 128GB, even at this point in 2023, will be perfectly fine. And then of course, this phone does have microSD card expansion too, so can't forget that. So if you have a bunch of files like photos and videos, for example, you can always offload that stuff onto a microSD card, and that will make a difference. Now for security features, with the A24 4G, like pretty much every Samsung Galaxy A series phone nowadays, we are getting Face Unlock, and it does have a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. So definitely a great spot for a fingerprint scanner, but real quick, let's give it a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, this phone does have Face Unlock too, so while that's definitely not rare by any means, it still is nice to get multiple options besides a pin to unlock it. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, up front, we got a kind of water drop notch thing for the front facing camera. This camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. So definitely a great camera setup here. In case you're wondering, despite it not having a dedicated depth sensing camera, it is built into the main camera, so it's not really going to make a difference. And as for everything else, I am glad to see this phone is getting an ultra wide camera and a macro camera. So if you do want a wider variety of features, this is definitely a great thing. And compared to a lot of phones like this, when it comes to this affordable under $200 kind of segment, depending on the phone, even if they do have good cameras, a lot of them don't have ultra wide cameras, and sometimes they don't have macro cameras. Usually it's the ultra wide camera that's left out, but still having both is definitely a nice thing. To put this into perspective, the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, which is actually a little bit more expensive than this phone, and it is a 5G phone of course. That phone doesn't have an ultra-wide camera for whatever reason, but this one, despite being a 4G phone and technically lower end I guess, again it actually does have an ultra-wide camera, so the point is, if you are looking for some good camera features, you're not going to be disappointed with this phone. And to give you an idea of what the photo quality looks like, here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. So definitely great photo quality here for what it is. Sure, if you're comparing it to a much higher end device, maybe you're coming from an older flagship phone like an S10 for example, it's not going to be quite at that level, so you might want to think about that if you are in that kind of situation. But in general, I feel like for the average user, for things people are typically using their smartphone cameras for, like again with the Instagram, I know obviously social media is a big thing when it comes to smartphone cameras, and then stuff like sending photos to friends and family, taking pictures for your own memories, or maybe you're doing something for work like you're a real estate agent and you need to get pictures for a home or something like that. Even in that kind of situation, I do think the camera here will be perfectly fine. It's really just if you already have the expectation of a flagship phone, or maybe you're more of a mobile photographer. In situations like those, you are going to want to get something a bit higher end, but in general, I feel like for the vast majority of people, the photo quality we get with this phone will be good enough. And to give you an idea of what the video quality looks like, take a look at this clip. Here's a quick test video with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. We are recording in 1080p right now. Also keep in mind what the audio sounds like. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, this phone can't record 4K videos. So if you are someone who's recording a lot of videos, maybe you're a content creator for example, and you want to get that higher resolution, then you will want to get something else. And honestly, in this price range, even though there are really no brand new phones that actually record 4K videos, there are phones like the Google Pixel 6a or the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. In the US at least, despite those not being the newest phones, you can get them for around $200-ish, which is not that much more expensive than this phone. And if you're not in the US, I'm pretty sure the Samsung Galaxy A24 5G outside the US is not really that much more expensive than this, and it can record 4K videos too. So the bottom line is, if you really want to record 4K videos, even around this price range, there are definitely options out there. But I feel like for what it is, the video quality on this phone is at least okay. So I don't really have any complaints. Now for the RAM and processor, with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G99 processor. Now, obviously, as the name implies, the A24 4G is not a 5G phone. So if you are looking for 5G connectivity, then you're probably not watching this video. But in general, despite not being a 5G phone, I do think the performance on this phone is actually surprisingly good. In fact, one thing I was not expecting is, with this phone, compared to a lot of entry-level 5G phones, I have actually found the A24 4G to be a bit faster. Now, that's not to say that this phone is like the fastest phone ever, because if you compare it to a much higher end device like the Samsung Galaxy A54 5G for example, or the A34 5G or something like that, it's definitely not quite that fast. But for typical daily activities like web browsing, social media, watching the occasional YouTube video, and maybe some light to moderate mobile gaming, for that kind of activity, I have found this phone to be plenty fast enough, and for most people, you will get a good experience. Now I ran a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and then comparing your results to these, and that of course is going to give you a much better idea of where this phone stands performance wise compared to your current device, because depending on what you're coming from, it may or may not actually be an upgrade. Again, if you're coming from like an older flagship phone, it's definitely not going to be an upgrade, but if you're coming from maybe an entry-level phone or a mid-range phone that's like a year or two old, then chances are this phone will be at least somewhat of an upgrade. And again, in my experience, for things most people are going to be doing on a daily basis, the performance is definitely good enough to give you a decent experience. Now for the battery, with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery. This supports 25 watt fast charging, so definitely a great battery here. With a battery like this, you can expect to get great battery life per charge. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're traveling for example, so you're not around a charger that much, and you still want to use your phone all day, a battery like this will be great for that. And then down the road as it wears out, with a battery like this, compared to a much smaller battery, you won't notice it nearly as quickly. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a longer time without having to replace it, then this phone will be a great choice for you. And even when it comes to charging speed, 25 watt fast charging is pretty good, especially for a phone like this. But keep in mind, the A24 4G does not come with a wall adapter, so you will have to get one yourself. Now for the software, with the A24 4G, we are getting Android 13, which honestly is really not surprising. But also keep in mind, Samsung does have really good software support too. So with this phone, you can expect to get several other major updates in the future. I believe it will be getting Android 14, 15, 16, and 17. So yeah, plenty of updates. So if you're someone who likes to keep your phone for multiple years, and you want to have the latest software the whole time, then in that case, the A24 4G, or really any Samsung for that matter, will be a great choice. In addition to this, The A24 4G does have NFC too, so if you like to use tap and pay, you'll be happy to know with this phone, you can use that no problem. Now taking a look at the overall design here, it does look at least decent, pretty much like every other Samsung Galaxy A series phone this year, but I will say I'm really not a huge fan of this back material. It's super glossy and it picks up a lot of fingerprints, or at least it shows them, unlike the more matte frosted kind of finish, which really doesn't. So on one hand, I kind of like the color effect we got going here, but as you can see, the fingerprints are a lot more visible than most people would probably like them to be, so not really a big fan of that. Aside from this though, we do have decent build quality like you would expect from Samsung. The phone is made entirely of plastic, but yeah, it does feel at least okay. And in this price range, most people are probably not expecting anything that feels really very premium, so it's pretty much exactly what you would expect from a Samsung phone under $200. But one thing I do want to point out is that luckily with this phone, we are actually getting a headphone jack, which definitely is a nice thing, considering Samsung has been getting rid of them for a lot of mid-range phones. So if you do like to use normal wired headphones, then this is definitely a great thing for you. But in conclusion, my general thoughts about the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. Now honestly, for an entry-level 4G phone, this phone is actually a lot better than I expected. We're getting a really nice display here, great performance, plenty of storage, a really nice camera, a large battery, and even features like NFC. The only real drawback is, and this is really only going to apply for people who are in the US, but keep in mind this phone is not officially offered by any US carriers. So if you are in the US and you want to get it, you will have to get it factory unlocked. But aside from that, I feel like even then, it's only going for like $185, which granted, when you consider US carrier deals, you can probably get something higher end for around the same price. But if you maybe don't qualify for one of those deals and you still want a new phone and you're not really that concerned about 5G connectivity, then in that case, this phone is still definitely worth considering. And then of course, if you're outside the US, again, it is really a great option. But this concludes my review of the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. Again, if you want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Calipus Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.